Welcome to the inaugural Fave podcast, an offshoot of my Fave newsletter, which has just published its 150th edition today. And I'm pleased to be starting a new podcast venture in which I will interview friends and family members, talk about their lives and backgrounds, get into the topics of the Fave, which include books and food and music and sports and humor, and then ask the guest to talk about a story, tell a story that they choose that we will get into. And then I'm going to conclude with a story of my own about my guest. So that's the format. Welcome aboard. And my initial guest today, someone I've known for over 40 years. It's my son, Roger Garfield. Roger, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Stan. Dad, Goat. It's a pleasure to be your first guest. It's a pleasure to be a podcast guest for you in general.
So the first thing that I would normally do would be to talk about how I met my guest, but in this case, a little bit different. I met my guest on his first, initial birthday back in 1984 at the hour of 8 a.m. when he came out and was kicking and rolling around and scrambling and gave me a little bit of premonition of what might follow in the future years. And since that time, I've had the pleasure of seeing Roger grow up. So I'm going to go through my standard questions with them, and then we'll get into some of the specifics. But the first question is, I think I know the answer to this, but when and where were you born?
I always thought it was 7:58, not 8 a.m. But maybe you didn't see me for 2 minutes. I remember it fondly. An Orwellian year, 1984. It was Richmond Heights, Missouri. I usually just tell people St. Louis, Missouri. It was December 15th. And I don't have a whole lot of recollection of that day, to be honest, but I think 8 a.m. ballpark is right.
Yeah, and shortly after you were born, various relatives began to arrive at the hospital. So your Uncle Bill arrived, and then your grandparents, both sets arrived. They all got a chance to hold you, and it was a momentous day for the Garfield family to have our first child born in St. Louis. And you were actually born in the same hospital as your mom, just by coincidence. So my next question to you is, where have you lived?
We lived in Clayton, Missouri. And then in 1986, after much deliberating, you and mom moved us to Northville, Michigan. I was about two. I think I was like a year and 10 months. And then lived in Northville until my first day of college, technically. Moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan. And during college, I think technically that's all. I just lived in Michigan, Kalamazoo, and Northville. I did have some summer jobs. One summer I lived in Orlando for a couple weeks. One summer I lived in Chicago for a couple weeks. Maybe, yeah, a couple weeks each job. The summer before my senior year, I lived in Gallatin, Tennessee with our good friends, the Liefeld family, and worked in Murfreesboro. When that summer, they offered me a job. So I could have skipped my senior year of college and stayed in Tennessee. I chose not to do that. Came back for year four at Kalamazoo. But then I was telling someone this story the other day. I thought I was going to move to Pensacola, Florida. I had flown down there and interviewed for a journalism job at a newspaper in Pensacola, and it went well. And the editor had said, "Hey, expect a call from our hiring manager on this date." And the date was like the Friday of my graduation from college. So I'm really upset in hindsight that he told me that, because the call never came. And that whole weekend, if you remember, I was waiting by the phone for this call that never came. And it worked out well, because after a distracted graduation weekend, which was fun, but that was sort of like the unfortunate dark mark on it. The next week, I called my old newspaper in Murfreesboro, and I told them kind of the story, just asking if they had any advice, knew of any jobs. And the editor was like, "Are you serious? Our high school sports editor just resigned like 30 minutes ago." And he hooked me up with the sports editor. And a couple weeks later, I was interviewing. And then like a month later, I moved down there. So I moved down to Murfreesboro. It was a little different than Gallatin, where I lived the previous summer. I was living on my own. Um, Great job, great people. It was just I was young to kind of be on my own in a place where I really didn't have a whole lot of family. I had some friends that I made, but um, that was one reason I decided to leave Murfreesboro. And I for a while I moved to Antioch, which is like a south suburb of Nashville. And then June of 2019, I moved to Washington, D.C. Lived there for 2 years.
What was earlier? It was 2009, right?
What did I say?
You said 2019.
2009.
Yeah.
2009. Thank you. It wouldn't be fair to your guests to skip a whole decade. 2009, and lived in DC for 2 years. 2011, I moved to Bethesda when I started teaching at a new school. Um, I lived a couple different places in Bethesda, but mostly lived on this basically this campus of the school where I taught. And then Christy and I moved to Silver Spring in 2018. We had two different houses in Silver Spring. I won't bore you with all the places I lived this summer in our chaotic summer, but now I'm coming to you from our new house in Baltimore, Maryland. So those are the places I lived. I did leave out my favorite place I lived, which was Madrid, Spain. I was 20 years old. I was fortunate to live in the north part of Madrid as a study abroad student for 3 months.
So as a new native of Baltimore, how do locals pronounce their city?
I think you have a good split. It's Baltimore and it's Baltimore. Um, I haven't noticed one predominant way.
So when you were growing up, who was in your family, both the immediate family and the extended family that you remember?
Well, I don't remember my younger sisters being born. I was 2 years and a few months. I think Tracy and Kathy are like a year older in gap than my kids, Summer and Kieran. So my kids are about 20 months gap, and I think I'm about what is it, like a 20, I guess like a 28-month gap with the girls. But certainly remember all of us being young together and the five of us, our nuclear unit, you and mom and Tracy and Kathy and I lived in Northville, and um, we saw in my memory with some frequency your parents, Papa and Grandma Garfield, Saul and Amy, and mom's parents, Grandpa and Grandma Hayes, Walker and Marie. We saw your siblings and their families with some frequency. I think we probably saw the Olszewski family the most as they lived in Cleveland and we would drive or they would drive to see us. So that would be David and Ann and Julie and Eddie. And um, on mom's side, we would usually see family when we went to St. Louis, which was once or twice a year, Christmas or Easter usually. Her brother Bill and Deb, Zach and Caitlin, and less frequently, but oftentimes in St. Louis, Buzz, Lauren, Walker, and Madison.
So the question I would ask other people is what their parents did. But in your case, I'd like to know when you were little, what did you think your parents did?
It was cool. My memories going to your old office. I think technically you would say it's Novi, the one at 8 and Haggerty,
Yes.
working for Digital Equipment Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
I knew you worked with computers. I knew computers were cool. I didn't know anything about their capabilities other than it was the loud, noisy thing you turned on with like the black uh, terminal, the black receiver, and the orange type, and we could type and print things off on white printer paper, usually just like scribble and gibberish. Um, and at that time, younger phase of my childhood, you weren't really doing what you've committed most of your professional life to, correct? You were working in a different role in digital as a manager, but then that evolved into knowledge management. So I think by the time, I got to high school, I knew more or less that you were a thought leader and you were working in communities and trying to be efficient with information and corporations. But when you were young, I mean, I knew you worked at an office, I knew you traveled, I knew you brought a briefcase to work. I knew I was excited when I heard the back door open. We were sitting at the dinner table. I knew if you were out of town and that door opened, I probably ran with a little more urgency to see you because I missed you more than if I hadn't seen you in like 8 hours. Um, so I knew you went to the office with some of your friends. You were fortunate to work with some of your friends that we met socially growing up. But yeah, I mean, did I know what you actually did? No, not at all. I knew you went to work. And mom didn't work for, gosh, like the first 10 or 12 years of my life. I can't remember exactly when she went to work as a back to work as a physical therapist, but I remember her going back to work was a big deal for her and that she explained to us what she did. So I knew what she did, but I was obviously older when she went back.
What did you like to do when you were in both elementary school and later in high school? What were some of the things you enjoyed doing?
Well, certainly from a young age, playing basketball, had a little Tykes hoop in our old unfinished basement. The story I tell all the time has to do with the plow pushing the snow up at the end of our driveway and allowing me to walk up a little ledge and stand on it and actually see the basketball go into the 10-foot hoop. Um, Imaginative play with my sisters. We played house a lot. Um, I remember playing with GI Joes and Ninja Turtles in my room by myself a lot. As I got a little older, I think my focus was a little less imaginative and a little more sports centered. I would like dunk on like a little temporary hoop in my rim and in my room and probably annoy mom with all the noises I would make from my room. Um, Never had video games. I think we got a Game Boy at one point that I recently found. I fired it back up and it worked. So trying to use that as an incentive for summer later, my daughter. But yeah, I think we were fortunate to grow up where we did because there were so many other young kids around. So we would play capture the flag in the yard. We would play games of pickle back and forth between our two front yard trees. You would not really care if we were out for hours. You wouldn't worry about us. We would just be playing with the other neighborhood kids, whether it was like playing in the neighbor's basement or running down to the empty lot and playing home run derby and baseball. Like we fended for ourselves a good amount of time. And I think some of my fondest memories are just those free summer nights with all the neighborhood kids playing capture the flag or throwing the baseball around or things like that in the backyard. In high school, uh kind of in middle school into high school, my social life, I tried to make it about basketball. I remember inviting people over to play basketball all the time. And whether it was like just me or 1-on-1 or 2-on-2, or sometimes we got like 3-on-3, 4-on-4, that was like in my head socializing. As I got older, and certainly after I got my license, I just loved driving around, like farting around, going to 7-Eleven, going to friends' houses, not doing much, shooting around. Um, at one point, we became really gung ho about being like super fans, booster club for our football team. So I remember Adam Const and I drove around, went to hundreds of houses and hundreds of recycling bins and tried to find empty milk cartons. And then we washed them out and we put pebbles in them because they were good noisemakers at these games. And we must have made like 100 of these noisemakers with pebbles and empty gallons of milk. So, there were less innocent things I did in high school, but that was about as innocent as it could get in terms of just like the time we spent, how much fun we had doing next to nothing, listening to songs on the radio, driving around. I've been telling people this lately. Some of my players, I coach teenagers, a lot of them aren't in a rush to get their license, and I don't understand it because getting my license at 16 and having that freedom and being blessed to have a car, like those are some of my greatest high school memories. And we never even went anywhere. We just drove around town. But being able to do it and have that uh, you know, free will, you could say, meant a lot.
Do you look back on those years fondly? Do you like your memories of high school?
Absolutely. I mean, there were some unfortunate things that happened. There were some things I just remember like interpersonal things with friends that I wish had gone differently. Um, but I would say 99% of it, we were 100% privileged and blessed, and we didn't know how good we had it. And I started to realize that a little more in college, but certainly more as I got older into my 20s, just like how lucky we were to grow up where we did and have next to no worries, you know. And that's part of my job as an educator now is just help kids get out of their own way and realize like the things they're caught up on are so petty. It doesn't matter like if you played 12 minutes or 14 minutes in the game or your socks are white or black or it's like try to help them understand the things that matter. And I had some good people, some good influences that helped remind me of that. But I think we had it so good. We were lucky to grow up in a pretty affluent suburb and safe life, not a whole lot of adversity, and that's a blessing, of course. But didn't realize how good we had it till we got older.
What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were young? What did you think you wanted to be? Or did it change over time?
I'm sure it changed over time. I mean, if you asked me when I was like 3 or 4, I would say I want to be Michael Jackson or a performer of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you asked me in elementary school, I think I actually did two different when I grow up speeches. And one was probably like the ignorant, I want to be an NBA player.
Mm-hmm.
And then one, I think I was set out very specific. I wanted to be a supersonic transit pilot because I had done some report on the fastest airplane in the world. I thought it was so cool. And I had a relative, Robert, mom's cousin, that was a pilot. So um, at some point, probably around the time you encouraged me to write for the Norfolk Record, I realized I love to write and I wanted to explore that. And then when I became a writer, I realized I love to connect with people and I wanted to be in the midst of something meaningful and have more connection than I did as a writer. And that was my big push to get on the other side of telling stories, but actually be a part of it as a teacher, coach, mentor.
Where'd you go to college and what did you study there?
I went to Kalamazoo College. I was an English major with a journalism emphasis.
And did you like your 4 years at Kalamazoo?
Today, I was telling someone about my mindset when I was in high school. I was talking to a Division III head coach today, and we're talking about our seniors who may or may not play college basketball. And my hope for them is exactly what I was able to have. I was able to go see a D3 game, go see how competitive it was, how good those players were, and kind of have like the delusion taken off the mask of, oh, I'm going to play D1 or I'm going to walk on at Michigan or Michigan State. When I saw that D3 game my junior year, I guess it was, of high school, I realized like, man, I'll be lucky to play on that court. And so my mindset shifted. I felt lucky to get into Kalamazoo and be recruited to play basketball and be a part of that group. So grateful for that time. Could I go back and change anything that would help my life? I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I would change and not be an English major. It's not like if I were an econ major, my life would be much different. But no, I think similar to my childhood, like no real regrets. An incredible place. I don't have a strong opinion that like a small school is better than a big school, but I do think for me it was a great fit.
What was your first full-time job?
First full-time job. You don't want to hear about my stat keeping at the Norfolk Rec Department when I was 14. It might have
We'll
been
save that for another
violating
time.
child labor laws. No, I'm kidding. Well, I alluded to it. I had an internship at the Daily News Journal in Murfreesboro, Tennessee in 2006. That summer. It's pretty cool. I wrote a lot of stories about a lot of different things. And then 2007, I accepted a job to be the prep sports editor and manage some older people, which was a challenge for me. But ultimately, we were a small sports staff and we all got along. And I got to do some pretty cool things down there in Murfreesboro, covered some college and pro sports, but mostly focused on the local high schools. And we covered them like the Detroit Free Press covers the Tigers. Like we had stories every day about all the teams and all the sports. It was pretty cool. I was there for almost 2 years.
And what do you do now?
Now I'm getting ready to start a new job. Um, in April, we accepted a job at a school here in Baltimore called Loyola Blakefield. It's a Jesuit boys' school, 6th through 12th grade. I'll be teaching theology in 7th and 8th grade, and I'll be coaching basketball.
What do you look forward to in that challenge?
This fall, I look forward to meeting as many people as I can. I'm going to have more students than I've had. It's a bigger school, it's a bigger place, it's more colleagues, it's more moving parts. So I'm looking forward to the challenge of managing that. The challenge of teaching theology full time. I've taught mostly reading and writing, English, grammar, language arts, literature, the last majority of my teaching career. I have taught religion, but teaching religion full time, I think, will be a challenge, especially to thoughtful young men like ages 12 to 15 that have great questions, and I'm not going to have all the answers for them. And then in terms of basketball, I'm just looking forward to helping cultivate a very robust fall for our guys where they get in great shape and they're working on their skill and we're doing team building and we're planting the seeds for what I hope is a very successful culture. And success I would define as, guys who are getting better every day, guys who care about each other, guys who care about everybody in the program, not just the guy that can help them. We have 7th, 8th freshman JV and varsity teams at our school. So I think an initial challenge is, can we integrate all 5 teams and even use the 7th graders to help the seniors get better? But then, practically get our guys to maximize their potential here this fall, as we have a really tough schedule coming up starting in November.
Is there any coach that you look to as sort of a role model or an example for you?
I had some really good coaches as a kid. You were my coach different times. You were my coach, whether it was formally or informally, always helping me understand there's a big mental element to the game, and strategizing and thinking about not just basketball, but logically, rationally thinking about life is a good way to go about it. And I think, I'm not going to name them all, but I had some really good coaches playing CYO. Coach Zach, Coach Greenwood, Coach Potok. um, had a great AAU coach in middle school, Coach Gio Thomas. Had a great freshman coach, Chris Cronin. Um, and, by the time I got to college, I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't. I learned so much from my college coaches. And, we weren't very successful. I wish things had gone differently, but I learned so much about defense from Coach Passage and so much about energy and life and just little things from guys like Coach Jim Horn. In terms of coaches that have done it on a bigger scale that I don't know personally, I really look up to John Beilein. I'd be lying if I said I didn't look up to Tom Izzo. Guys like Greg Popovich. I've been fortunate to see those guys speak, and I cherish the notes I took from when I saw them speak. It's like gold to me. Not that it's going to help us win games in Baltimore, but kind of helps helps me on my course. And then, so many coaches I've been blessed to coach with, I would just go on forever, but I'll name Coach Cruzen at Prep, who's an offensive genius, and Coach Turner at Gonzaga. I can't list all the ways that he's helped me or everything he's taught me, but he's a winner. He's a guy who just you can't not be in a room with him and want to compete. And he does that by caring about his guys and caring about the outcome, but also like loving the details of the process of getting better.
And what is a hobby or an interest that you enjoy?
Well, with my 2 young kids, I don't have too many hobbies. Um, I try to play some golf from time to time. Not well. Um, I think for me at this stage, like getting out and playing golf whenever I can is just a blessing. I can relax and it's fun and it's something I've played for almost 30 years. I should be a lot better since I played for so long. Um, I do like to write from time to time. I have a season of the year where I focus on writing, but like whenever I need to clear my mind, I definitely write. I wouldn't call it a hobby, but more of an interest or just um, almost meditation for me. Going to the gym and shooting free throws is meditation for me. Shooting around, playing pickup basketball. I don't know if you call that a hobby, but certainly something that when I have time is something I love to do.
Well, great. Those are our background questions. Now we're going to shift over to the Fave Five, right? So hopefully most of our guests will have some interest in the areas that I like to write about. We'll start out with books. What do you like to read?
For a long time, if it was just for me, I was reading sports writing. Earlier before that, I think the first time I felt myself loving reading was Calvin and Hobbes when I was a kid. And maybe that became Goosebumps, Hardy Boys at some point in there. But for a long time it was sports writing because my task in high school and then as I got into college as an English major was you have to read these books. And so I wouldn't say I became like someone who read for leisure until I got older. But now, I mean, I love to read fiction and nonfiction. Most recently, some of the good books I read, um, Larry Miller, he read, gosh, I forget the name of his book, but he wrote an incredible autobiography about being a street tough from Philly. And then he wound up being like the head exec of Jordan Brand. Incredible life story. Wright Thompson is one of my favorite authors. He writes for ESPN, but he's written a few books. And I recently finished The Barn, which is an incredibly detailed account of Mississippi and like the area around the barn where Emmett Till was murdered. And it just uncovers some really like painful history of that era and explains why it was covered up for so long and why so many people never came forward. It's so well done. And he's from that part of the country, so he makes it very personal. Um, on the fiction side, lately I've been reading a lot of Ann Patchett. Right now I'm reading The Patron Saint of Liars, and I recently finished gosh, what did I just finish? Well, earlier in the year I read recently I read Tom Lake. They're not all coming to me. Um, her nonfiction memoir about her and her friend. She's great. Everything she writes, I love. I've recently discovered Taylor Jenkins Reid. I loved Daisy Jones and the Six and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Um, yeah, I think that's sufficient for now.
Is there a particular book over time that's been one of your favorites?
Miracle of St. Anthony by Adrian Wojnarowski is a nonfiction about Coach Bob Hurley.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Last Amateurs, probably my favorite book by John Feinstein. Season on the Brink's pretty good too.
Yep.
Um, some of the books I've been fortunate to teach are some of my favorite books. To Kill a Mockingbird, The Hate You Give. I've taught those for a long time in the eighth grade. This year is the first year I taught Night by Elie Wiesel. And that was incredible to teach. Not just because I have family that's Jewish, but like it's like I'm kicking myself that I was this late to the game. It's such a great book. I never read it, never taught it. So I would love to teach that again.
So moving on to our second category of food, what do you like to eat?
What don't I like to eat besides cheese? Um, yeah, what do I like to eat? Well, I feel more connected to Maryland now that we're in Baltimore. Being in Silver Springs, like so adjacent to DC. Now I feel like we're more Maryland folk. So crabs, crab cakes, crab bombs, um, sushi. If I can ever get like a great fresh sushi meal, it's it's probably above in terms of my tastes and my preferences, anything else. Um, and then I think I would be remiss not to say chicken wings, like a good chicken wing. Ah, man, some of my favorite things. More frequently, what do I like to eat? Uh, Protein, veggies. I try to stick to those if I'm in my day to day.
So if we were going out to a meal together, where would you want to take me?
I got some new spots for you from the Baltimore. I'm sure you're right about them. Um, well, I think it's special because we tend to go there when you come down to visit, but also it's just like undefeated. I've never had a bad meal there. That's Jerry's Seafood. The crab bomb is this seemingly small lump of crab. It's like a simple thing. It's not a crab cake because it doesn't have filler. It's just lump crab with Old Bay, maybe some lemon, but it's so filling because it's all a lump crab and it looks like a little scoop of a coleslaw, but it's pretty incredible. Great service, great sides. I know you love the stewed tomatoes.
Yep.
Um, so if you come down soon, I'll take you to some more local spots. And a lot of people have been telling me about all the great crab cakes in Baltimore, so we'll check those off.
Oh, I look forward to that. All right, let's move on to music. What's a favorite song or musician or concert or album? Pick one of those and tell me what's one of your favorites.
Okay, let me see if I can go through each one. One of my favorite songs is For the Rest of My Life by Brian McKnight. And part of the reason is I've always liked the song, but I sing it to Summer as a lullaby. And I've pretty steadily sung it for 5.5 years. And it really does calm her down. And so there's a special connection on that
Mm-hmm.
song. Um, Musician, Aretha Franklin. I think for a long time, I always loved when her hits came on, but then maybe in the last 5 years, I've explored more of her gospel records from earlier in her career or like from after her pop phase. And some of her gospel music is just so moving and she doesn't even need music with her. It's just her and a mic. Favorite concert. I know there's a question about the first concert, but my favorite concert I ever went to was the first concert I went to with friends, and that was the Dave Matthews Band concert in April of 2002. It was at the Palace of Auburn Hills. We had won a baseball game, and then we got up to Auburn Hills as fast as we could. Tyler Carter, Robbie Harmer, and Matt Sebastian. And my mom's borrowed green Grand Caravan. And I think I had liked Dave Matthews for a few years, in large part because my friend Matt Schwartz would drive me to school and we listened to Dave every day, every single day. But it was kind of surreal to be at a concert because you had brought me to a lot of concerts as a kid, and I'd seen my uncle perform at some pretty cool venues, but I'd never been to like an arena show. And that concert, it was surreal because I had been to Pistons games and I couldn't believe people like were on the floor packing the house for a concert. And then some of the songs that he had recently released, he played a lot of them that night, and there was a palpable like appreciation and love for those songs just because I had listened to them so much. So I was really excited and satisfied after that show. And then my favorite album, ooh, I'll say Notorious B.I.G. Life After Death, 1997. One of my favorites.
And what was the first record you bought?
That would have been one of them.
Okay.
I think the first CD I called mine, I stole from you, Green Day Dookie. Sound right?
Yep.
1994. And then maybe I used my allowance as a 10, 11-year old to start getting some CDs from used record stores. Like I had long gone with you to record stores as you created your prolific CD collection. Impressive. If you ever are at Stan's house, you got to check out his CDs in the basement. But he built that collection up over I would say mostly over the early 1990s. And then toward the mid 90s, I became more interested in the music itself. So I would go into the record stores with him and would be looking for my own CDs. I remember loving Offspring, Smash. I had an Aerosmith CD I really liked. Um, I don't think I knew Dave Matthews then. I probably discovered him a little later, but he was about the time he was becoming popular. But then like later 90s, I was more into hip hop. I had one of Tupac's last albums. Those are the sorts of things that I cherished in the 90s and listened to all the time.
What was the last concert that you attended?
The last concert I attended. Well, I don't think we've gone to any shows this summer. Yeah. I think sadly, we went to the Weezer show in the like about a year ago. It was like an anniversary trip.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty cool. It was at one of our favorite venues in DC, the Anthem. They were playing their entire Blue album, which they don't always do, and people always clamor for it. But I'm trying to remember the details. They came on late, which wouldn't have been an issue, except we had a teenage high school babysitter, and the next day was like the first day of school. So we felt guilty if we had stayed there the whole show. We probably had gotten home at 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
I think still as it was, we got home at 1, but we left early, and they had a couple of my favorite songs, "Only in Dreams" and "Say It Ain't So," that they hadn't yet played. So we listened to them on the ride home. But
Got
it
it.
was cool. Christy and I didn't know each other when Weezer came out, but we both appreciated the band a lot, and so it was cool as old heads to go see them together.
Now, I think you have an interest in sports, so I'll just check on that. Was there any sport that you enjoy watching?
Sure. I don't know that I can say I have a favorite like sport or level. I love watching football. I love watching basketball. I don't watch as much baseball or love it as much as I did when I was a kid. Um, Even as a kid, we'd turn on like WGN and watch the Cubs at home. And I liked watching Ryan Sandberg and listening to Harry Carey. But I do like watching golf, and I do like watching playoff hockey. I do like watching soccer live. I really like watching hockey live. If I had to pick, probably be men's college basketball.
Yep. What's what's a favorite athlete, team, or sports memory?
Favorite athlete? Well, coming up, I was a little. I'd be lying if I said I remember the Pistons live, like in the Bad Boys, right when it was happening. I was kind of aware of the Pistons, but I think I got my history on the Pistons from the Pure Pistons VHS that I probably watched 100 times as a kid. Um, but when the Fab Five came along, and I was 6, 7, and Jalen Rose was such a brash, like clear leader of that group. He was my favorite player, and he stayed my favorite player for a long time. He was smooth. He was skilled. He was a great passer. He was always talking. He didn't shoot a ton, but when he did, he was a good shooter. He was my favorite player for a long time. And then you said team.
Yeah.
Ooh, favorite team? Yeah, probably the 2004 Detroit Pistons. After they added Sheed, they I think they'll get some of those guys into the Hall of Fame if they're not in there already. But at the time, it wasn't like a clear Hall of Famer. It was a clear unit that was better than the sum of the parts that the Lakers had. So I appreciated them for a lot of reasons. Great personalities on that team. They played the right way, but they played together. Um, and then favorite sports memory. Well, one of my favorites is just going to the Final Four with you every year. But the first time we went, 1997, I even remember when I was at Boy Scout camp the previous summer, and I called home and you told me you had gotten the tickets through the lottery. And I was like homesick at the time. and that got me out of my Paul or whatever funk I was in. And then we were able to go see Arizona win the national championship in Indianapolis. A lot of fun things happened that weekend. Um, as a 12-year-old kid who loved basketball and loved his dad, that was hard to top.
Out of all the Detroit teams that you love, is there equal love for all of them, or do you have a pecking order?
Mm. Well, I think it's football and basketball, a little bit of baseball. I mean, I love, to be honest, love claiming I'm from Detroit, claiming my Detroit teams. I can't say I watch a lot of Tigers games. I love rocking the Old English D. And when they're good, of course, I get more interested and they're in the playoffs than they're on TV here. Um, but no, I'll carve out time. I'll go out of my way to try to find the Lions game or the Lions bar. And then the Pistons, now that they're more relevant and they're going to be competitive in the playoffs, I do follow them more closely than I have in a long time. But I think in terms of my whole life, the mid 2000s Pistons, I was like a ravenous fan. Like everything I could read about them, every time I could watch them, watch replays. Like I lived vicariously through them. If they lost, I wasn't as good a mood the next day.
You think you'll become a Ravens or an O's fan?
I do think it's smart to support the home team, but it's going to take some time.
Okay, gotcha.
Summer, we were going by a Ravens flag the other day, and Summer said, "Daddy, do we like the Ravens?" I said, "I don't like the Ravens. I don't dislike the Ravens. I actually have a lot of respect for John Harbaugh and the organization, but I don't like the Ravens." Um, you don't have to dislike the Ravens. And then she said, "But Daddy, don't we like the Lions?" And I said, "That's right. Don't tell your mom."
All right, and our final category is humor. What's a favorite comedian or comedy film or TV show or funny book that you'd like to mention?
Favorite comedian? I can't list one. I would say Seinfeld and Larry David. I would say Dave Chappelle, maybe more so Dave Chappelle from 20 years ago. Um, Eddie Murphy, Martin Lawrence, Robin Williams. Um, More recently, Shane Gillis cracks me up. Favorite comedy film? Hmm, that's tricky. I love The Big Lebowski. I love Friday. Favorite TV show? Seinfeld and Curb. They're at the top. And I would probably put Curb a little above Seinfeld, just in how hard it makes me laugh. And funny book. That's a good one.
You just gave me one. Steve Martin writes the written word, which I found myself laughing uncontrollably at portions of.
I don't know that I think of it as a comedy, although it did really crack me up back in the day. There are these books that are great works of fiction, and any golf fan of golf should read them. The original one's called The Green. It's by a pen name uh, Troon McAllister. And as a teenager, I just loved those books. And I remember cracking up hysterically at several times throughout the books. I do think you passed on to me some Gene Shepherd books that I really appreciated, but I don't have like a one that's like in my head,
Gotcha.
funniest book ever.
All right, last question. Who is the best at making you laugh, and who are you able to crack up?
Mm. Well, you've always been great at making me laugh. I think I can crack you up pretty easily too.
Yep.
Um, Gosh, my cousin Walker comes to mind. One of my best good friends, Damon Crone. Um, Definitely one of my best friends, David Oljace. We miss him. And I think one of the reasons my wife married me is I can make her laugh pretty easily.
That's always key. Found that helpful in my own case as well. All right. So now it's come the time in our podcast where I'd like to ask you to tell a story. I've given you some choices of types of stories. Which one did you pick out to tell a story of?
There are maybe a few categories this touches. So, you asked for favorite sports memory. I mean, I have so many. I've been lucky to coach for a long time. So, this is a story about coaching. It's a story about, um, you know, it's a story about survival. It's a story about life and what matters most. I'm not even sure where to start, but I would just say I'm starting coaching in Baltimore and I'm leaving this incredible area, even though it's just down the road. The DC basketball area has been so good to me. So many people have welcomed me, and I've grown up in so many ways down there. As a coach at Gonzaga College High School, we were fortunate in 2017, 2020, and 2025 to win the DC State tournament. Um, and we cut down the nets at GW Smith Center. I'm going to tell the story about the 2020 championship. Um, Trying to think about what the background I need to provide for this. Um, First of all, we had an incredible senior class. Not just like that they all played college sports, but just great kids. Terrence, Chuck, Miles, Josiah, Carlos, and Christian. And they had won a championship. Three of those guys were on the championship. We won as freshmen. They won another championship as juniors. And then as seniors, the obvious expectation was that they were going to win the WCAC championship. And we had a good year, but we came up short. We lost in the semifinals to Paul VI. And the way our schedule works, we still have more basketball to play. So after we lost that game, the guys are dejected in the locker room. That's our Super Bowl. And we said to them, and it's like you think it's falling on deaf ears. You're like, you're so lucky that you still have more basketball to play. We have another tournament that starts in 2 days, the DC State tournament. This is crushing. You'll never get this game back, but you have more ball to play, and your best ball is ahead of you. And I don't know that they believed that at that time, or they were even listening to me. But sure enough, Wednesday rolls around. We have a quarterfinal. We don't play our best ball. We win. Semifinal, we win, and we're in the championship Sunday. Okay. So that day, I go with Christy to um, a childbirth yoga class. She's 38 weeks pregnant, and she asked me to come, and it was a little bit about like breathing techniques and relaxation before the baby comes. And I just remember like leaving that a little early because I was going to walk down to our game. And I walked maybe an hour across DC, and I was taking it all in. I was like realizing we uh, get this opportunity to play for a championship and how grateful I was for that. Coming where I come from in Michigan, the state championship is everything. To us, it wasn't the same perspective, but still, it was a state championship opportunity. I was kind of on edge because I knew our first child was due like within the next week or two. And we were at this formal childbearing class. So I'm processing all that, but I'm trying to get my mind right for the game. It was a beautiful, cold day. It was March 1st, 2020. Get to the gym, and we're playing what's now called Jackson Reed High School, is formerly Wilson High School. The public school in DC that's had the most success against us, the private school in DC that's had the most success over maybe the last 10 years. The student sections were not necessarily equal. Their student section was out in full force. And for them, this is no knock on like the public school, but like the chance to beat the private school represents to the public students like this incredible opportunity. And so it was like their whole school was there. And they were up in the upper deck and they were loud. And it was a close game. It was a physical game. I think there were a couple technicals in the first quarter. And as those whistles rang out, their students started to throw things from the stands. Water bottles, programs. They started coming down onto the court. Christy's right behind me. She's 38 weeks pregnant. I'm a little nervous because of the game, but I'm even more on edge because there's stuff flying out of there. Now, nothing was thrown down toward the stands, so I was able to sort of cool off a little bit, but tensions were high. Close game. Second half starts. There's more technicals. And there starts to become more of like specific fans yelling at specific fans across the arena. So these two guys in particular keep pointing down at the section where Christy's sitting. And she was sitting with the other parents and grandparents and family supporters of our team. These two teenagers are like yelling, and it looks like they're pointing right at her. It actually was a vocal grandfather of a player on the court, a Gonzaga player, and they were going back and forth. And this escalates to the point where these young men come down into the aisle right by Christy, probably 10 feet away. Okay. This commotion stops the game. I don't remember how many technicals there were in the game or what happened, but when that commotion starts to become recognized by the whole arena, two things happen. The fans started throwing stuff down at that part of the arena toward Christy. Now, in my mind, I hop up. So she's sitting like two rows behind the bench. It's elevated. I climb this railing. I have my notebook and like my white dry erase board, and I'm using it to literally deflect water bottles. Like I remember like a sun-kissed water bottle going end over end right toward Christy, and I batted that thing out of there. The other thing that happened was from across the arena, the dad of Terrence Williams, who is a bodyguard for Genuine. He's a very large man, very intimidating man. He recognizes what's going on. He beelines around to the other end of the arena, and he, with a very simple question, do you guys want to go outside and talk about this? Diffuses the whole situation. So he's standing there, like at the top of the stairs, and these punk kids who are picking on a grandfather and making my pregnant wife hyperventilate are like, no. And they go back to their seats with their tail between the legs. I don't know where security was for the arena, but it took the dad of a player who had a little experience with security getting those guys out of there. And it took some time for Christy to calm down for everything to sort of cool off and for the game to resume. The fourth quarter starts. I can't bring myself to sit on the bench. I coached the whole fourth quarter from up on that railing. I'm yelling out at the court. I'm making sure she's okay. I'm yelling out at the court. We end up pulling away. We win by 7. Devin Dinkins, my guy, dribbles the timeout, waves at the student section, and guess what that brings on? More crap they throw down on the court. Luckily, no one got hurt, but they're chucking water bottles at our players. It was terrible. I can't believe in hindsight, like the security didn't do more. But I had the board ready to deflect away from Christy, and luckily they had pretty much thrown all the water bottles by that point. By the time the game was over, we were DC state champions. Christy did not go into labor. She came down on the court, took a picture on the court with her 38 weeks pregnant. We cut the nets down. And one of the reasons I tell that story is it was just such a emotional game. It's so hard to win as it is, much less with all this other stuff going on. We had a special team, and I'll never forget like celebrating in the locker room with those seniors after. They deserved to win the championship. That was the last game we played together. We thought we had more basketball, but we didn't know that a global pandemic was coming. And we didn't know that they had their whole senior springs, their proms, their last memories with their friends in high school basically taken away. We also didn't know when our baby was coming. She was born 9 days later, March 10th, 2020, as the team was driving to Alhambra. So she's born, and the team's heading to its final tournament, which I wasn't going to go to anyway because of the due date. They got out there, and then they had to come back. They were told the tournament was canceled, and we were in the hospital learning about all these things at the same time. And so it was surreal to become parents but it was also surreal to be going out into a world where we really didn't know what to expect, um, outside of, being new parents. And you had mentioned earlier in the podcast about everyone coming through the hospital when I was born. I had built up this emotional uh, connection in my head when our first child was arriving, that would be a similar thing. Family friends would be coming like a revolving door through the house during March Madness. That never happened. Christy's parents were able to visit that day, which was a blessing, because if Summer had been born a couple weeks later, they probably wouldn't have been allowed into the hospital. So that we were able to win the championship, that we were able to welcome a healthy daughter, both beautiful things that we had a lot of time to reflect on that spring. Um, but I think even 5.5 years later, like so many of us in the basketball world, or so many of us in education, or so many kids who had things taken away from them during COVID, forget how much they miss things and they don't cherish them. I'm guilty of it too, but I would like to reflect on that time as such like the calm before the storm of walking to the game, calm before the storm of,
Yeah.
not being a parent. And then, it'll never be like that again. But that was one of our more memorable wins we've ever had. Just remember hugging Steve after everyone had left the court, and how satisfying it felt. It's hard to win, but it was a pretty sweet day.
Well, thanks for sharing that story. That's quite a story that you were able to share, and that feels like that the time that started right after that is almost from a different era now, doesn't it? That we've moved on from those times of being so isolated.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, most everyone remembers that stuff. I wouldn't say fondly or with nostalgia, but there is some of, like, for me, if we were talking about our childhood, if we had had that pause during our childhood, I think our unit of five would have become closer, just because there would be nothing else to do. We'd pour into each other.
Yeah.
And for us to have those months with Summer where I would have been working and I wouldn't have been around nearly as much, just to just sit with her quietly and process
Mm-hmm.
the magnitude of becoming a dad, it was really a blessing in disguise.
Yes, there were actually some silver linings to the whole thing about what some things that we started doing then that we're still doing. I want to wrap up with telling my own story, which plays on something you alluded to, which was your first Final Four that we went together in 1997, which I believe was the first of 16 together, if I'm counting correctly.
I think it's right.
And I know how excited you were. I back then, when every time you'd meet anybody before we went, you'd tell them, "I'm going to the Final Four." I remember being at a practice, a CYO practice, and was telling them, "Well, we can't come and practice next week. We're going to the Final Four." So we drove down to Indy together, and when we got there, they already started up the festivities, the fan jam, I think we called it at the time. It was in the convention center at Indy, and we walked in there, and there was the University of Indiana basketball court laid out, and they were about to start up something called the Ultimate Pickup Game. And it featured Isaiah Thomas and Oscar Robertson, Larry Bird, and Jamal Wilkes. Two of them were on each team, and then they took a fan to complete their 3-on-3, and the referee was Bill Walton. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. You don't see this every day, and wouldn't it be nice to be one of those fans playing them on those teams? But we watched that with great interest. And after the game was over, they let players like you come onto the court and form teams to start a 5-on-5 game. And I remember you running out there and grabbing guys and bringing them together and huddling them up. And the next thing you know, a game is going. And you hit a three. And later you told me I hit the three from the same spot that Larry Bird had hit it from in the pickup game. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then the rest of the weekend, I remember we had so many nice things that happened. You got to meet Dick Vitale. You got to win a prize by making a bunch of free throws. Got to do an ESPN Sports Center broadcast and record that. So to me, that was like that's what it was like, the ultimate for a basketball fan to have all that going on. And then you took an interest in the Arizona team. They signed autographs for you at the practice on your shirt. you made a sign for them on the night of the championship game, and you rooted them on to victory. So that to me was a very memorable father son tradition that started that year.
I'm grateful that you took me that year. You could have taken any friend or anybody. And I know when I got older, like in high school, I think you and mom wanted me to not miss any school, but I think it only amounted to like 1 day or 2 days. But yeah, I was able to convince you to take me a couple more times. And then certainly as I became an adult, it was easier to meet up. It's
In
still
fact,
not
in the
the
2001 Final Four,
sacrifice we make. It's great.
yeah, in the 2001, I told you that you wouldn't be able to go with me because you're going to miss school. So it was going to be in Minneapolis. I explained, I'm sorry, but you can't come. And you were very persistent that you just wanted to come. And I said, no, you can't come. And then you just kept at it. So finally I said, right, well, write me something that explains why I should take you to the Final Four. And you wrote up some eloquent argument in favor of it, promised to work hard in school. And I said, all right, we're going. And we went. So that was another good memory.
The power of persuasive writing.
Right. Well, I want to wrap up now by thanking you for being my first podcast guest. I knew it would go well, and it did. And I've enjoyed all 40 of our years together, and hopefully there'll be a lot more. And is there anything you would like to say as we wrap up this podcast?
Thank you for having me. I haven't been able to do a lot of podcasts. I've done several. They're always fun. This means a lot to be your first guest. Anytime we can talk about the past is fun. And you guys got to subscribe and like the Fave 5 podcast, right? Subscribe and like.
We'll be distributing it on our Substack platform. So hopefully all of our Substack subscribers to the newsletter will like this podcast as well. But in any case, it'll be coming out shortly. So thanks, Roger, very much for joining today. And we'll wrap this up.